2015, and we're at Bethany Village, and we're with Don Hamrock.
That's correct.
And I'm Jim Mitchell, and you are?
Bradley Wing.
And this is from Wright State University's Veterans Voice Program.
Okay.
And thank you for coming out this afternoon.
All right.
Don, why don't we begin with tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from, where you grew up.
Well, let's see. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, a long time ago, 1921. Moved to Cincinnati for about 6 or 7 years, and then back to Dayton. Graduated from Stivers High School. Went to University of Dayton, and in '42 I enlisted. I think it was, I don't know, June or July, in the V-12 program of the Marine Corps. That's Officers Candidate School.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't call me until a year later, until July of '43. Is that what you want?
Mm-hmm.
So they sent me to Penn State University for 3 months to take certain courses. Then to boot camp, Parris Island. And then we had some other rigid training at Camp Lejeune. And I passed all those things and went to Quantico, Virginia, and Officers Candidate School. The bad thing is I busted out, and I deserved to. So then I was sent back to Camp Lejeune for more training. And I was trained in artillery and anti-aircraft, specifically 40 millimeter. So I were there for a few months, and they put a battalion together. I guess they call it a replacement battalion. We went by train from Camp Lejeune out to Camp Pendleton in California. Stayed there for, I'd say a week. Then we shipped out overseas on the HMS Bloemfontein, big troop carrier. And we stopped at Hawaii, a few other islands, and then Saipan, and then our final destination was Guam. So we got off at Guam, and I believe it was early December of '44, I believe. And I was put in the 3rd Marine Division, which was a combat division, as a machine gunner. They were training for the invasion of Iwo Jima. And about 3 weeks after I was there, a truck drove up, and the sergeant says the following men's name, get their gear and jump on the truck. And I was one of the people that was called. So they took me to an anti-aircraft gun that was above the big B-29 field. I don't know, what's it, was Henderson Field? No, I don't know the name of it, I forget. So I was I guess you'd saw the captain or the private first class of the gun. We had no air raids on Guam during that time. And went on a couple of patrols, not too successful. We found out where the Japanese had been, but we didn't encounter any. And then for a while I was an acting sergeant stationing men on board our ships out in the harbor. I guess that went on for a couple of months. And then after the war was over, we got news that the garrison on Rota, which was a bypassed island between Guam and Saipan, had about 4,500 Japanese that wanted to surrender. So I was one of 500 Marines picked to go over there. And it was I believe a 5-day thing. And we went on patrols. The second day was an interesting one. We had a captain in charge, and I guess the rest of us were mostly private first class. And we went over the airfield and found a large ammunition depot, and then up about 300 yards further on was a series of caves. And all the Japanese surrendered except about 15, one group of 15 to 20 men, and they were armed, so we were looking for them. So So my captain sent me up, said, Hamrock, go up and scout those caves. That's about 300 yards away. I got about 50 yards from the cave, and here this group of Japanese come trailing out of the cave entrance, the back portion of it. So at that point in time, first thing was to shoot into them or shoot over their heads. I decided not to do either because they were moving away from us. So I started hollering at them to surrender, and so did my other group that was behind me. And they stopped, turned around, and came back and surrendered. That was an interesting time. Then that night I was talking with another man to go back up to the cave area and guard the ammunition depot. And that was about it. Got back to Guam, and then somewhere, I think February, we boarded the Manila Bay in a small aircraft carrier, came back to the States through the Panama Canal, landed at Norfolk, and were given our discharge the next day. Got on a plane, flew back to see my wife in Cincinnati a couple days, and then joined my family back in Dayton. Not much to say, but it was an interesting time. That's it.
So you took basic training at Paris Island.
That's right, I did.
How did you like basic training?
Not very well. I don't think anybody did.
What did you learn from basic training?
Well, I learned you shouldn't question
The drill instructor.
your superior officer or superior MCO. Oh, I was made a corporal, by the way, as a result of the Rota thing. The captain made me a corporal. Like anything else, it was, we went there, I think it was December, and it was pretty cold. In fact, there was snow on the ground. And, once in a while when somebody gets smart aleck, so they take you, make you go out and crawl on your stomach around and stuff like that. And you just had to obey what they said. So I adapted to it, and that was about it.
So you sounds like you spent a lot of time going to training and stuff.
I did.
The V12 program and boot camp and OCS back to
right.
AIT, out to Guam.
Right.
And I actually know a little bit about Guam.
Did you?
I even know where Rota is.
Yeah.
My oldest was born on Guam. A lot different time.
Yeah.
They now have 5,000 Marines there.
Really? One of the areas on Guam that you knew there were a lot of Japanese on Guam after the surrender. Weren't very many people live there, and it was high grass, I remember, and palm trees and cliffs and things like that. But we almost caught a couple of them, but we didn't. So.
Well, now it's one of the big Japanese tourist
Oh, it's beautiful
areas.
weather, yeah.
You knew when the monsoons was coming, and you knew when it wasn't.
Well, you could go out in the rain and not worry about it, it was warm. And one of the things that was funny, and you were there, probably, is that once or twice a year, you'd wake up in the morning and there were thousands of little frogs.
We were talking about this earlier.
Where they came from, I don't know. And 4 or 5 days later, they all disappeared. Do you know about that?
Yeah. First off, they weren't edible.
I wasn't interested in eating them.
Well, the thing was they were poisonous to eat.
Were they? Yeah.
And they were just defiant little toads.
Where did they come from?
Just out in the boonies, out in the jungles.
Yeah.
But they would come up to the roads and thinking nobody else is going to mess with us, we'll just cross the road.
Yeah.
And these trucks and cars and stuff would run over them. And you would be driving down the road at night, thump, 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 thump.
And back then there were no snakes on Guam.
No, there are now,
Yeah,
the
I heard there were.
brown rat snakes. And one of the squadrons on the base, as a fundraiser, came out with a T-shirt, said Guam, Flat Frog, capital of the world.
Is that what they were called, Flat Frog?
Yeah, that's what they called them.
What was the name of that air base? That big, the B-29?
There's a couple of them there now. Anderson Air Force
That's
Base.
it. That was it. Anderson. Yeah, that's
And
where
it's
most
still
of them.
there. And then there's Brewer, which is the Naval Air Station, which was down in Agana.
Well, we were near Aganda. You know where the old Pan American building was?
I
was bombed out.
I know about
Well,
where
we
it
were
was,
pretty
yeah.
close to that place.
I think there's a plaque there now.
Yeah, we were on a hill, and it was a sort of a boring sort of life, but, you know, they trained us to try to, I think they were gonna send us over to one of the ships that guarded Okinawa, and at the last minute they decided not to send us, so we didn't have to go there, so all in all, I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah, sounds like it. But still, tracking down stragglers is still a hazardous job. You couldn't like, you want to come out and play?
Yeah, when I flushed these guys out of the cave, they moved rather rapidly. They were in order, but they were not running, but they were walking very rapidly. And then there were two other ones that came out about 10 seconds later. Both had rifles, and they joined them. So I theorize now that the thing is over, that they were in there in the event that I decided to take a pot shot at the guys. I probably would have had a pot shot. I mean, I didn't think about it back then, but I think that's what occurred.
Now, did you have any brothers and sisters?
I was the only child.
Only child. So, what was your reaction on December 7th, 1941?
Well, same as every other American. America was pretty patriotic back then, as you know. Today it's gone to pot pretty quick. No, I wanted to join, and I thought that I'd like to be a Marine, and I'd like to be a Marine officer, and I guess I wasn't good enough, and I think that's true. So I was not an outdoor man, but I tried my best. I almost made it, but I didn't.
So, and the reason why I asked that is because your December 7th was your 9/11.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
everything.
you lived through 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to see it twice in your lifetime. How did that, when 9/11 occurred, how did that impact your, I mean, this was twice now in your lifetime you've seen something like this.
Well, everybody was angry, you know, and everybody was not knowing what was going to happen, and I think most people wanted to join the service. I did not know that when I joined it, I was going to wait a year before they sent me. I guess I appreciate that, but I did not know that, so.
Just didn't realize they were going to, when they were going to come and ask you.
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to go, you know, in the next month or two, but I was able to continue UD for a year.
So you come back in 1945, 46, and you discharged.
February of 46.
So what did you do after you got out?
Well, let's see. I got married when I was in OCS, which was a mistake. And I don't mean it was a mistake to get married. It was the timing was not right. So my wife had gotten an apartment and had it furnished and had a nice little Cocker Spaniel dog, and all I was lacking was a job. So my father worked at the base, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he got me a job as a recreation supervisor in a recreation program. I was there for about 2 years, and then they made me director. So I was director of civilian recreation. Later on, maybe 20 years later, we had one of the largest recreation programs in the country. And later on, they had a big base restroom system that's maybe 30 different locations that they fed all of the civilians and military. And they fired that guy, and they put me in there as an interim to run the place. And I did, and I was successful, and they asked me to take the job. So I ran that for 20 years. I also was a general manager of the Officers Club for a year, 2 6-month stints while they fired people. I did that at the same time I did this other job. And I also ran general manager of the golf course, one of the golf course, Twin Base Golf Course. So I had 2 or 3 interesting jobs, and my wife is still with me, although she's in long-term care upstairs, not feeling very well. But
Any children?
I have 3 children. I have a boy that lives here, who works in a factory. I have a daughter who lives in California. She's got a house at Pebble Beach. And I have another daughter who lives outside of Atlanta. She's in real estate. And
Grandchildren?
2 grandchildren. I have a grandson named Chip that's in San Francisco. He works in I guess they go around and scout different companies and determine whether or not they're ready to buy it, and whatever you call that. And I have a daughter who's still going to college. He graduated from Brown, and I don't know what college she graduated from, but she's now taking her master's degree. And all three of my children were fortunate enough to get there. I never did finish my college degree, so I never did get a good degree.
Now, when you worked out at the base, was that in the MWR?
That's right.
Non-appropriated funds?
Non-appropriated funds. We were paid by the profit that the base restaurant made when I was a recreation director. And then I wasn't put in a position to make profit. We did $7 to $8 million worth of business a year, and we're required to make 4% of that, which sometimes it equaled $350,000 a year. And I was helpful in building the golf course, the civilian golf course out there, which is the first and unheard of. And then while I was running the base restaurant, we built a $100,000 room onto it, built them a big maintenance shed that was probably another $90,000. So those were interesting times.
Yeah, I remember the joke when I got stationed at Wright-Patterson. The two most sacred things on the base was the golf courses and the ducks.
The golf course, the military golf course, not civilian twin base.
They're both nice courses. I've been on.
Yeah,
both.
but the military golf course up until lately was all done with appropriated funds, you know. And the other golf course had to be on its own merits. That's since changed. They're combined now under one leadership.
Well, it's like now all the club functions are under one roof.
Yeah, the NCO Club joined the Officers Club at one time, was one of the largest in the world up there. They had a big package store, and they sold booze, and they'd make a lot of profit. And then somebody decided they'd turn it over to military recreation. They did that, and then the basic chains gobbled it up later on. And the Officers Club has deteriorated since. They used to have a lot of women that came to dances, and they stopped that. And they used to have cheap booze, and that's no more.
Still cheaper than the outside.
Yeah.
So, one of the questions I would ask, because this tape will be viewed by a lot of people through the Library of Congress and through research and stuff, and even through people doing research at Wright State. Based on your life experiences and your time in the service, what would you have to say to the young people today?
Well, of course, first thing I believe in is a strong military. If we don't have a strong military, we're in trouble. The second thing I believe in is controlled immigration, you know. And used to be, when I was young, I thought the congressmen and the senators were for God and the nation, party, and yourself. And someplace along the line, God and country are out of it. It's party and yourself, and I think that's our biggest problem. Both parties are messed up. I don't know what to do about it, except it irritates me.
Yeah, I understand. Do you have anything you would like to share with us before we close this out?
No, I wish I could solve the problems that we have now, and it's very discouraging to see what goes on. Other than that, I don't have anything. When I was in recreation, I was able to bring some big speakers out. We had big banquets, and we had Lefty Gomez, who pitched for the Yankees, Harry Stuhldrayer, who was one of the Four Horsemen, Bob Feller, Bud Wilkinson, you've heard of him,
Bud
the Oklahoma
Wilkinson,
coach.
yeah.
Adolph Rupp, the basketball coach, and other local people like Pete Rose and people like that. We bought the '64 Olympic basketball team here and had them play at the University of Dayton Fieldhouse. That's the one I think Oscar Robertson was on, I'm not sure.
Well, that sounded neat. I always enjoy talking to folks have experienced things that I haven't had a chance to experience. I know I only heard about, and I always find it more enlightening to me and enriching. Well, thank you, Don, very much.
Okay.
Thank you for your service, both to your military service and, again, your civilian service to the Wright-Patterson community.
Thank you. Okay. Been a pleasure.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
All right.
Okay, my name's Terry Ramirez, and today we're doing an interview following up with Don Hamrock. Today's October 23rd, 2015, and I just want to say thanks, Don, for making time in your schedule to
That's
continue
perfectly
your
all right.
interview.
I've got so much time on my hand today.
Awesome. So, the last time we interviewed you, you talked about training for invasion in Iwo Jima, and did you want to talk more about that?
No, when I came overseas, they put me in the 3rd Marine Division and the Infantry Division as a machine gunner, and they were training for Iwo Jima. And about 3 or 4 weeks into the training, at the end of the day, they came out and said, "All you fellows, listen up. We're going to read some names. We want those people to grab their gear and jump on board the truck." They didn't tell us anything more. So one of the names they called was mine. So I jumped on the truck, and they took us to about 1.5 miles away near the large airfield where all the B-29s were, and put me on a 40mm gun position. So that was a very fortunate move for me, because I didn't have to go to Iwo Jima. But that's the way it is, and that was very interesting. And we went on several patrols and things like that, nothing significant. And, that's about it.
Okay. What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Well, we really weren't off duty, but I think they had, we weren't too far from the old Pan American building where, these ships used to fly across the ocean, and there were water ships, airplanes. And that was bombed out. Beside it was sort of a cement area, and I used to play a little basketball there occasionally, but I think that's about the only recreation area that...
You didn't have any time off? Do you have any vacations?
Well, no.
No.
I mean, you do what you want to do, but there wasn't anything to do there,
So you never took leave and left the area?
You didn't have such thing as leave that I can remember.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And we had K rations and C rations, and that was about it, but we were fine, no problem.
Tell me again what your times in service were. When did you come in and when did you get out?
1942 on July 23rd, I believe. But they didn't call me until the following year, and then I was discharged on, I believe, February 26th, 1946.
Okay. When you were discharged, where were you when the war ended and when you were discharged?
Well, we were on a 40mm gun position when the war ended.
Where at?
That's in Guam, and right above the Anderson Field, where all the hundreds and thousands of B-29s flew in and out of every day.
Okay. How did you return home?
We returned home on an aircraft carrier, Manila Bay, and we went to Hawaii and had one night there, and then went to the Panama Canal, and the eastern city, I don't know whether it was Balboa or not, we had another Liberty there, and then through the Panama Canal landed at Norfolk, and they bused us then back to Camp Lejeune, and we were discharged the next day. Got a ride to Washington, got a plane, joined my wife in Cincinnati for a couple of days, and then back home to Dayton, where I rejoined with my parents.
How were you received by your family and community?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I got married while I was in the service, and my wife had an apartment for me and a nice little Cocker Spaniel dog, and big surprise. We had a great time. Great reunion.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
didn't have much readjustment problems back then. My father worked at the base, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he was one of the consuls, and they were hiring 3 people as recreation supervisors. So I was one of the ones that were chosen, and so I went to work, and about a month later, so a couple of years later, I was made director of recreation, and then ran the program for 20 years. And
MWR, is that what you're talking
and
about?
I was promoted to general manager of the base restaurant, which is, they did most of all the food operations on the base. And 2 stints at the officers club at, doing both jobs for 6 months, which I really worked over there a full year. So I have my hands full of those 3 jobs, because I was also over the Twin Base Golf Course, which was all interesting jobs. Very happy.
Awesome. Have you remained in contact or reunited with any fellow veterans that you knew during your military service?
Unfortunately, no. They did have get-togethers right after the war for 4 or 5 years, and I was never able to go, and everybody got too old, so they disbanded. And I kept in contact by telephone with one of the men that was on my gun crew named Ray Nealon. He was in Massachusetts, but he's since passed away, so I have no contacts with anybody that I knew in the service. Well, there was a gentleman by the name of Kermit Davis, who was with the 3rd Marine Division, and he's in a school system and retired. I think he's in the Bellbrook area, but that's it.
Okay. When you were in the military, how did you keep in touch with your family?
Well, I don't know what kind of mail they call that. Was it email? It wasn't email, but it was some kind of a mail that you sent little letters, and they got approved. So maybe I sent a letter once every 2 weeks. I got a letter, every 2 or 3 days from my wife, and it was fairly good. I had it very, very nice. Guam was where I was most of the time, overseas, and that was a real pleasant environment. It was nice weather.
Mm-hmm.
You could sit out in the rain. I don't remember any bugs. At that time, they had no snakes on the island, and it was a very nice place. I hate to say it, but it was.
They didn't allow families to come to Guam at that time, did they?
What place?
Guam.
What about it?
Did they allow families to accompany you?
No, there was no. You couldn't take liberty from over there, or no one ever came in there. Not during the war, or even immediately after the war. No.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
I joined the Veterans of Foreign Wars, but I'm not very active. I pay my dues every year, and maybe go over once every 5 or 6 years. But
which one is it that you're?
That's the one in Wilmington.
Okay. You've talked a little bit about what you've done since separating from the military. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No. I've had a very good life.
How did your wartime experience or your military experience affect your life?
Well, it made me grow up a little bit faster than I would have ordinarily, but as I said, I was one of the fortunate ones, and outside of 2 or 3 years out of your life, it was not a bad experience. I was very contented with what happened.
Okay. What are some life lessons you learned from the military?
Well, of course, not to question the superior's decision, but that's not very, it doesn't happen very much in civilian life, so I don't think I learned a whole lot, except grew up a little bit. When I went to the service, I had never been out of town or anything. I was not an outdoor man, so there was an adjustment when I first went in and went to boot camp and all that, which wasn't too difficult. It was all right.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any specific memories or fond memories of your time in the service?
No, I think about it once in a while, a little bit more since I've gotten pretty old. But for a long time, I hadn't thought about it, no.
Okay.
I had, my best friend, before I went in the service, was named Lucian Powers. He was in the 4th Division, and he was killed on Iwo Jima. And then what was turned out to be my best friend since the war, and he's since died, was named Bob Barker. And coincidentally, he was shot on Iwo Jima, but the wound wasn't serious. So that was sort of a coincidence, and that's about it.
Okay. How has your military services impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I believe a lot differently than what our present administration does. I think we should, number one, always have a strong military. We must have one, otherwise there'll be no country. And all these people that have to be helped out, and I feel sorry for them. If the country's ever taken over, they would be totally out of sync. So a strong military is extremely important, and I can't understand how anybody would argue with that point. Because you've got people like Iran and Russia that if they thought they could take care of us, I think they would. So we've got to stay prepared, and I don't mean prepared to attack somebody, but prepared so that we can defend ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That means spend a lot of money on research and development like they do at Wright-Patterson, so we have the most modern airplanes and the most modern ships. Our technology is a little bit ahead of the other people's.
Okay. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview? You can talk about anything you'd like, Don.
No, I don't think so. I enjoyed talking to you and telling you my my experiences, and I think you've done a good job.
Okay. I think that concludes our interview. Thanks, Don.
Okay.